This is really messed up. I was in my early 20s when it happened. I was dating this girl named Chelsea who lived in a nearby town. I had to drive for 1 hour to get to her place and spent some days of the week there. We were working at the same company in a bigger city that was roughly in the middle of the way for both of us. Chelsea's town was quiet and had a lot of green around it. Several summer camps existed in the area, and as a kid, she would always spend the summer months there. After years of visiting those places, she ended up making a strong and united group of friends who grew up together. They were all in their early 20s and decided to live near each other. Some of them even worked as counselors in one of their favorite camps. They were so integrated that almost every day at least one of them would show up to have dinner at Chelsea's place or invite us to hang out somewhere in the area. Super nice and friendly people though. Within weeks, I felt as if I was really a part of it. The group had around 6 people, 4 girls including Chelsea and 2 guys, Rick and Tom. These guys were roommates and inseparable. Picture a random white dude wearing flannels, light washed jeans, and dirty Timbs. That was Rick, a super common guy. He had a daughter. Rick must have been about 23 at the time, and the little girl Emma was around 5. Her mom was a girl he met at a party. Her name was Alejandra. They hooked up and she got pregnant on the first and only night they spent together. As her parents were extremely Catholic, they insisted her pregnancy was a gift from God and made her keep it. From the outside, the situation looked super under control and healthy. Alejandra was going to college, and the girl would stay at Rick and Tom's place during the week. It's safe to say those 2 dudes were raising the kid. Rick had part-time jobs around the town and would work as a camp counselor over the summer. I knew him and the girl pretty well. I went to his apartment several times and played with the kid, and they would often visit Chelsea. After a few months, Rick left the town looking for a better job. Everybody was baffled as nobody was expecting him to leave. The girl stayed with her mother and he went to the capital of the state. The routine changed completely. Now Emma would only spend the weekends at her father's place. Her mom would drive her there. Apparently Rick was doing fine. Some months later, Tuesday morning, I was sitting in my cubicle at work when Chelsea sent me a message, which is odd. We have to talk. Meet me downstairs outside. Oh shit, I thought. What have I done? I go downstairs and she's crying uncontrollably and her makeup is all messed up. What happened? I asked. Rick's daughter is dead. He's going to jail. What? Everything after that Tuesday became extremely odd, creepy and nonsense. The crime was just so brutal and gruesome that the whole state became aware of it. Rick is taking a shower on Sunday evening, getting ready to drive his daughter back to her mom's place. The girl is playing alone and he leaves the bathroom to get his clothes. The apartment was a 1-room studio and sees Emma on the floor with a thick canvas bag around her head and lots of blood coming out of it. Desperate, he removes the bag to find his daughter's face completely disfigured and bloody. He places the bag over her head again, calls 911 and waits. That was Rick's first version of the story. He claims somebody broke into his place while he was showering and brutally murdered his little girl. Initially, the cops believed him, and even though there was not a single sign of somebody else in the scene, upon inspection of the surveillance cameras, nobody was seen breaking into his apartment and his windows were still shut. The autopsy of the body showed Rick's skin under the girl's nails and his fingerprints all over her body. Somebody strangled her and then hit her in the head several times on hard surfaces around the apartment. They found a bloody t-shirt that belonged to Rick hidden under the bed. He never pleaded guilty. However, during the trial, he changed his version to, "I don't remember what happened that night. I'm sorry." "Why didn't you remove the bag?" the police asked. "Because it was not a nice thing to see." That was his answer. Alejandra's interview that went live on television was just utterly terrifying. She claimed Rick had always been an unstable man with several mental health issues, and he would constantly bang his head on the wall when feeling distressed. Needless to say, the incident destroyed the group. Nobody could believe Rick was that monster. They paid for a lawyer, and some of them even went to court. They were all exposed by the media, and the town shunned them. Tom couldn't believe his buddy had committed such a monstrosity. He lived with the dude for years and even helped take care of the girl. The last time I heard from him, he was obsessed with the grim details of the case, trying to find evidence to release Rick from jail. Don't you guys think a violent person capable of killing his own daughter would have shown signs of his true nature before? I just never understood that. Why in the world would he do it? My last post got removed, so this is the story re-uploaded. I hope that by sharing my story, anybody going through something similar can spot the red flags sooner than I did and get themselves out of a potentially dangerous situation. I was 17 and in my senior year of high school when this story took place. I took pottery as one of my electives. In that class, I met Beth, who was a junior. We became good friends instantly, and I brought her into my friend group since she was new to my school and hadn't made many friends yet. During my senior year, I was going through a lot. My mom and dad got divorced, and my mom stopped her meds and had uncontrollable mood swings and anger outbursts. She brought in a new man soon after who was an absolute lunatic. I confided in Beth during that time, and she told me I'm always welcome to stay at her house, so I don't have to be around all of that. So almost every weekend I stayed over there. This means I was around her parents from time to time, but mainly her dad since he worked from home in his office, and her mom traveled a lot for work. Beth told me some pretty weird things about her parents. She said they were swingers and would occasionally bring home random couples to hook up with. She said she thought that was gross and couldn't wait to move out. I got weird vibes from her parents almost instantly, but particularly the father, who I will call Joe for the remainder of the story. The first thing I noticed was how strangely he treated Beth. Like this one time, Beth and I were in the kitchen making something to eat, and Joe came and started messing with her, almost like how two siblings play fight with each other. He would get a spatula and playfully smack her with it, and then she would get annoyed and run after him, or he'd poke her 1,000 times just to annoy her, and they would constantly play push each other. I could tell Beth was genuinely annoyed with him and got so frustrated she yelled at him to stop, but he would just laugh it off like a kid. Maybe some won't find that strange, but to me it was just plain weird. Another huge red flag involving her dad was the time Beth heard through the grapevine somebody at school was talking shit behind her back. Her dad was so invested in the drama and wanted to know everything going on. He made a literal kick account, messaging app, and told off the girl who was apparently talking crap, saying horrible things to her. It was known that the girl was assaulted her freshman year of high school, and Beth had told her father about that. When he was writing those messages, he literally told her that she deserved it, which is beyond screwed up. That was such a red flag to me, and I should have stopped going over there, but I was young and stupid. They also treated me like a daughter and did a lot for me, so I felt like I was sort of obligated to keep going there. As more and more time went on, I stayed at their house. The weirder and creepier things got, and now he started shifting over to me. I remember it being May 2016, and Beth and her parents wanted to throw me a graduation party. Or should I say Beth and her dad, because the mom was away on a business trip. They knew I was going through a lot and that this would cheer me up. I was so thankful that they were doing that for me though. The day before the party, I had to go to the dentist and get one of my molars extracted. How fun. Beth's father said he could pick me up and take me to their house after, since I would be staying overnight and having my party the next day. When he came to pick me up, we had a long drive to their house because they lived in the middle of nowhere. During the ride, Joe's son from a previous marriage, called him. After a few minutes into the conversation, Joe said, "I'm not doing too much. Just taking my name to the house and setting up the party for tomorrow. She just went to the dentist, so she got galls in her mouth and can't talk. Just how we like our women, huh, son?" And he let out the creepiest laugh. I just sat there in complete shock after hearing him say that. I mean, WTF? For the remainder of the car ride, I stayed silent. Not that I could have talked anyway, but I just wanted to get out of that car as fast as possible. We get to their house and start setting up for the party. For context, Beth and all their friends that were coming to the party were underage, but Beth's dad went crazy buying a ton of alcohol. I wasn't comfortable drinking because I had never really drank before this occasion, but I just went along with it and figured I didn't have to drink that much if I didn't want to. The next day the party happens and we're all having a good time swimming, listening and dancing to the music, eating and drinking. Joe was practically with us the whole time, handing out drinks to everybody. He was trying to include himself in our conversations and wanted to hang out with us. I thought it was so bizarre, but I tried to look past it and enjoy my time because they really put a lot into the party. Now nighttime rolls around and the majority of my friends start to leave, but a few asked if they could stay the night because they were too messed up to drive home. Beth's house had a big living room and a guest bedroom, and her sister's room was vacant since she recently had moved out. So Joe said they could all find a place to sleep. The people who stayed were basically all guys and people who were friends of our friends that heard about the party and just showed up. Some of them I had just met that day at the party. I was shocked that he let all these dudes stay over. He was so paranoid about Beth having a boyfriend or even going to prom with a guy. Yet he let these underage dudes get drunk and let them stay at the house. Now here's where things take a huge turn and got worse. The same night, I and Beth and the random dudes are all chilling in the living room, watching some movie. Joe decided to come out and sit with us like he's one of the pals. He starts talking up with the guys and out of nowhere he says, "Isn't blank my name is Stunner? I always say, once she's 18, she's mine, and I'm not letting anyone else have her." Once I heard that, I was done. After I went home the next morning, I knew I had to stop going over there, which ultimately meant I couldn't be friends with Beth anymore. I felt horrible, but school was over and it was summer and I graduated. And Beth wasn't allowed to leave the house and hang out with friends since her parents were oddly strict. Yet Joe gave us all alcohol and let the guys stay the night. Makes no sense. So the only time I would be able to hang out with her is if I went back to her house, which I wasn't going to do. I was also moving to live with my grandma in another state. It was the best decision for me at that time. I told Beth and she was devastated. I was like her only friend and she was trapped alone in that house. A month after that last incident, Joe showed up at my house. He had lended my mom something and was coming to pick it up. They were outside talking for over an hour and I was trying to listen from the window. Basically, Beth told her dad I was moving and was trying to persuade my mom that I should live with them and that it would be good for me. He said they have so much room in their house and even had a car I could use. I wouldn't have to pay them anything. My mom, not knowing how creepy Joe is because I never told her, told him she would talk to me about it. I basically told my mom everything that happened with Joe and she was disgusted and told me to not go there. Who knows what would have happened if I stayed with them. Beth was going to be back in school since she was going into her senior year. Her mom was always away for work, which means I would have been alone with Joe, which absolutely terrifies me. This happened 5 years ago. The last time I heard from her was in 2017, after I had basically moved. Her sister texting me asking if I had heard from Beth. I said no, and she basically told me that Beth left home and nobody could reach her. I tried calling and texting but got no responses. They finally found Beth shortly after, and when I asked if everything was okay, she just said some minor things happened, but she's okay now. She didn't go into detail about what was going on, and it makes me wonder what happened for her to have run away from home. I just hope she's okay now and out of that house. Update on my mom. She's in a much better state of mind. She dumped that POS guy and started going back to therapy and is back on her meds. She's living her best life and I'm so proud of her. Update. Guys, I just went down a rabbit hole trying to see if Beth had a Facebook and I have some updates. She was never allowed to have social media when I was friends with her, but I saw she made an account in 2018, which is the one I found. In 2019, she got pregnant and had her baby that same year. I don't see any pictures of who the father is. It's just pictures of her holding the baby or the baby by itself. The last time she posted was early 2020, so over a year ago. It seems like she doesn't use the account anymore because she's gotten many birthday wishes and people writing on her wall, all of which she is unresponsive to. I found her mom's account since she was tagged in a photo and saw that she divorced Joe and has a new husband. I'm not sure if Beth still lives at home, although in the photos it looked like she was in a different house, so I'm hoping she moved out. As for Joe, I also saw the creep on Facebook. He's been pretty inactive too, and the last time he posted was in 2018. I wish Beth and her baby the best, and I really appreciate your guys' concerns and well wishes for her. I know this story is going to sound like BS, but this story actually happened to my cousin and me in the summer of 2018. My cousin and I live pretty close to each other in the suburbs of Detroit. We both love photography and taking long drives listening to music, so that's exactly what we did on this particular day. We drove about an hour north to a small town and found an abandoned barn that was also for sale. At the time, we didn't spot any trespassing signs, so we decided to be adventurous and go check it out. Huge mistake. The barn was in semi-decent condition, although the paint had begun to peel off. Structurally, it was pretty sound though, so I didn't feel uneasy about going in. I'm an avid urban explorer in Detroit and have been in far worse buildings. Once we got inside, we somehow ended up in the basement of this barn. I immediately was getting some bad vibes. There were little girls' clothes, toys, and furniture littered throughout the basement of this barn. I thought it was creepy as hell, and so did my cousin. Before I continue, behind the barn was a pretty decent sized cornfield. This cornfield backed up right to the barn, so we decided to be arty and take a few pictures in the corn stalks. I snapped a few shots of my cousin, and we decided it's time to head back to the car. Walking through the first row of corn on my way back to my cousin's car, I see a vertebrae in the dirt. At this point, I stopped dead in my tracks in disbelief. Like, is this actually what I think it is? Or is this an animal bone of some kind? I start looking around and, man, there were several more. They were too big to be deer. I yell for my cousin, who was almost back to the car, and have her take a look. We both start really examining the ground, and we keep finding more and more bones. Now, for the record, I've taken a cadaver lab in human anatomy in college, so I'm very familiar with the human body. We found a fibula and fully intact femur. That's when I really started to freak the heck out. We decided to call the cops because we knew this was serious. We waited in the car for a good 15 minutes, totally freaking out until the cops arrived. Once the cops came, there were two, we all started looking through the corn and nearby trash pile. The cops, I don't think, believed us, and I distinctly remember them saying they thought it was a deer carcass. That was until I found a full rib cage in the trash pile, and they changed their tune real quick. The cops told us that they would need us to leave, and they were calling a full forensic team out to start collecting evidence. We left totally shaken up. On the way out, I did see a no trespassing sign, and I'm sure the cops did too, but if they did, they didn't care. We gave the police our information, but we never did hear anything from them. I also watched the news pretty closely for the next few weeks and didn't see anything. This was one of the creepiest things I've ever experienced. I do have a photo from the barn I'd be happy to share. Doesn't show any remains though, of course. I've quibbled with the thought of publicly sharing my story for a while now. Recently, I've arrived at a place where I think the benefit of sharing outweighs the risk. People can be so judgmental. So I'm taking a chance and just putting it out there. Maybe it will help someone. Many times I've looked back on the odd events leading up to the scariest night of my life, October 5th, 2015. I like to say that I did everything right, but honestly in hindsight I should have done more. I'm convinced that my son, who's 3.5 years old at the time, actually saved me from harm that night. I could have easily become another statistic in the crime database. Although my stalker did not hurt me physically, it took me months to get past the psychological damage. Here is my story. In May 2012, I temporarily exited the workforce following the birth of my son Chris. He was born with a physical birth defect that would require multiple corrective surgeries during his first year of life. He was also born 2.5 months early, which had complicated things further. NICUs are no fun. Chris's father, Aaron, agreed that I should stay home with our son until he was 1 year old, considering the circumstances. In May 2013, I felt comfortable enough to leave my son with a babysitter, so I went job hunting. I ended up being hired on the spot as a waitress at a small but very popular chain restaurant in my little town. Let's just say that this little diner is widely known for its waffles and leave it at that. I was hired on to work second shift, the newbie shift because it's not as busy. After 2 months, I had worked my way up to first shift. The breakfast shift is the moneymaker. By the summer of 2014, I had long built a clientele of regular customers that enjoyed my service and tipped me well. Enough for me to have a little put back in savings, which came in handy when Aaron and I broke up. It was not an amicable split at first. I ended up moving out of our apartment with Chris and renting a small 2-bedroom trailer in the same town. It was mid-November of 2014 when I first met Ryan, the man who would later stalk me. It was an abnormally slow Saturday morning shift at the diner. 2 men, one late 40s or early 50s, the other maybe early 20s, walked into the diner together and sat down in my section. They were my only customers at the time, so when the older man of the two started making small talk, I had the time. The older man introduced himself to me as Ryan, and the younger man with him was his son. Right away, by his body language and tone, I could tell Ryan was being flirtatious with me. He even cracked a cliche joke saying, "There's no way you work here because you're too pretty and you have all your teeth." Honestly, I wasn't super amused with that kind of humor. I had heard it a million times over by then, and while Ryan was decent in the looks department, I'd even venture to say semi-attractive. I was a little annoyed with being casually hit on by him. I was 25 years old at the time and much closer to his son's age. But nevertheless, I faked merriment because a happy customer equals a better tip. It's just part and parcel to the job. Suffice it to say, my fake laughing and smiling paid off, earning me a $10 tip on a $20 ticket. They were only there for 30 minutes too. Not too bad, I thought to myself. The following weekend, Ryan came back to the diner. This time, and very subsequent time thereafter, he came alone. There was nothing unusual about this interaction compared to the last. I took his order, we chit-chatted when I had time, and I kept his coffee refilled, and that was it. But apparently, he enjoyed his experience because, again, he left me a nice $12 tip on an $8 ticket. Ryan began visiting the diner every weekend from then on, up until the end of December. By then, he had started coming 2 to 3 times per week, and at this point, he really started showing an interest in getting to know me. Now, that's not something unusual per se. I had some other regulars that I actually developed friendships with, some even getting me Christmas gifts and such, so I did tell him things about myself in casual conversation during his visits. Just normal things that normal people talk about, though. One of the things I eventually told him was about the medical miracle that is my son. I even bragged about the fantastic job his doctors did, showing him the before and after photos of his surgeries. Over the past several weeks, Ryan's attitude towards me had changed. He was no longer this annoying, flirty, middle-aged guy, but rather a seemingly caring person. Maybe I was naive, but I genuinely appreciated his kindness, and I did not interpret it as a romantic gesture at all. Ryan continued coming by on my shifts for breakfast 3 times a week. February 2015 is when the first strange event occurred, which was soon followed by a string of more. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I had picked Chris up from the babysitter and was heading home from work. Now, where I lived was on a small uphill dead-end road. As you pulled onto my road from the main highway, you could easily see my trailer on the right side at the top of the hill. It was positioned perpendicular to the road, and the back side of it is visible as you drive up the road. As I eased my way up the hill, something immediately caught my eye. I could clearly tell my back door was open. I put the brakes on immediately and tried to figure out what to do. I never touched or unlocked that door, much less opened it, so I knew something was horribly wrong. A door is not going to unlock and open all by itself. I ended up parking my car off to the side of the road and calling Aaron. At this point, we were on good terms and co-parenting our son very well. Aaron came straight over and checked out my trailer while I remained back in my vehicle with Chris. About 5 minutes after entering, he called me and told me it was all clear. Again, a small trailer. So I made my way up the hill, expecting to have been robbed or something, but nothing was missing. There was no damage to the door, so Aaron basically brushed things off, saying that I must have forgotten to close it, or something like that. But I knew better, and since there was no sign of a B&E, I decided to let it go. 2 days later, on Thursday, I came home from work and the same thing. My back door is wide open. At this point, I know I'm not crazy. I know I have locked that damn door. It didn't have a deadbolt, by the way. It just had a lock on the doorknob that you turn. I had even tested it out that morning before work to make sure it was locked, so I called Aaron again. I stayed parked with Chris on the side of the road while he did a quick pass through my trailer. And again, nothing out of the ordinary except my open back door. A quick inventory showed me that nothing was missing. I was nervous at this point, thinking that somebody had broken in twice, and Aaron disagreed. He attributed the problem to a faulty doorknob lock, which made no sense to me. He then went to Lowe's and purchased a type of heavy-duty swivel lock to install on the door that locked from the inside of my home. He wanted to put my mind at ease, at least. So, while he installed the lock, I combed through the house. I literally spent hours after Aaron left inspecting every nook and cranny of my trailer. The outlets, my shower head, vents, my panty drawer, etc. I thought that maybe some freak had broken in and planted secret cameras since they didn't take anything. I didn't find anything amiss, so I begrudgingly let it go. So 2 days after that, so on Saturday afternoon, I'm off work heading uphill on the road towards my driveway. My son is spending the weekend with his dad, so I have the house to myself that evening. A wave of relief washes over me as I see that my back door is still closed. Now, I don't know why I decided to do this, but something compelled me to actually inspect the door up close. I needed to also make sure it wasn't tampered with. To my horror, I discovered that it had. There were pry marks along the edge of the door jamb. I immediately went inside and unlocked the door so I could open it and inspect further. The edge of the door was bent to hell and back on the inside, where the doorknob met the jamb. That damage wasn't there 2 days ago when Aaron installed the new lock. I deduced that somebody had probably been using the credit card trick or something similar to easily break into that door, since the way it locked was by the knob. And when they figured out that would no longer work, they tried to pry it open, not knowing that a new lock was on the other side of the door. I'm thankful that lock held. At this point, I called the police and made a report. They basically told me there wasn't much they could do in this instance other than document the incident. They told me to call them if anything else happened. Needless to say, that wasn't satisfactory to me, but I didn't know what else to do. I didn't feel comfortable sleeping at home that night, so I ended up making the hour drive to my parents' house and crashing there. Nothing else happened for a little while. By March, I had been able to put February's events behind me and feel secure in my home again. I was working and going about life as usual. At this point, Ryan had begun visiting the diner 5 days a week. Oddly enough, he was there each shift that I worked. It became a running joke with the other waitresses, and in fun they teased me about having a stalker. I would soon find out just how true that actually was, because in April, things got weird. I came home from work one day to find my grass had been mowed. Now, I usually paid a neighbor to do it for me since I don't have a lawnmower. My yard is small, but maintaining it was a requirement of my lease agreement. My neighbor didn't charge much to mow it, and he needed the extra cash, so it was a win-win. I knew I hadn't asked my neighbor to mow recently, so I thought it was strange. I asked him if he went ahead and decided to do it anyway, and he said he hadn't. So then I called my landlord and asked her if she had mowed my grass for some reason. The lease said if it reaches a certain height, then she would mow it and charge me for it. I knew my grass hadn't been high enough to warrant that, but it was the only plausible explanation. Of course she said no. She hadn't mowed my grass. I was stumped. I then assumed that an anonymous neighbor must have mowed my grass out of the goodness of their heart. Like a pay it forward kind of thing. I mean, what else was I to think? All throughout April and the beginning of May, my grass was being anonymously mowed once per week. I know it sounds strange hearing that, but at the time I genuinely thought a neighbor was just doing neighborly things and didn't want to be recognized for it. On May 5th, 2015, Aaron and I decided to take Chris to the zoo. When we got back from the zoo late that afternoon, we discovered that my front door was cracked open. Ugh, now my front door did have a deadbolt, but I must have forgotten to lock it. How stupid of me. You can imagine how upset I was due to my back door being tampered with multiple times back in February. I just didn't understand why this was happening again. Like all the other times, nothing was taken. My belongings seemed untouched. Yes, I was feeling targeted, but I didn't call the police because I felt like I technically had nothing to report. There was nothing stolen or vandalized, just an open front door, so I let it go again. 2 days later, I would discover the depth of things. May 7th, 2015. It was one of my rare off days. I was at home relaxing when the diner called me. I answered thinking maybe my boss wanted me to come into work. It wasn't my boss, but my coworker Celia. She stated that somebody named Mary called the diner asking to speak to me. Mary had asked for me by name. Since I wasn't at work that day, Mary left her phone number and requested that I call her as soon as possible. I thanked Celia for relaying the message and ended the call perplexed. I didn't know who Mary was, but out of curiosity I gave her a call. Mary ended up being Ryan's estranged wife. I didn't even know he was married. She informed me that Ryan had a nervous breakdown while they were arguing earlier. He started raving like a wild man about how my name is a better girlfriend than she is and a wife. He told her that we were in love and that he had been taking care of me and my Down syndrome son for months. My son doesn't even have Down syndrome, by the way, and he's not mentally impaired in any way. She initially thought that it was all just crazy, fake talk, considering his mental state. He mentioned where I worked, and he said we were going to get married. Also said that I'd asked him to adopt my son. He said that he was going to run away with me in order to get away from her. He even told her he started visiting me after following me home one day. When he said that, Mary knew that something was wrong. Ryan had somewhat of a history with mental issues, and Mary was used to him weaponizing things to hurt her feelings during arguments, even if those things were lies, but she said this time was different. She knew he had started frequenting the diner, and red flags went way up for her when he admitted to following somebody home. So she decided to call the diner to see if anyone by my name worked there. When Celia confirmed this, Mary perceived the possible danger, and she left me her name and number, requesting a call back. My head was absolutely spinning at this point. While things were finally starting to make sense, I was still gobsmacked. At one point in the conversation, Mary mentioned my grass being mowed. Yes, Ryan even flaunted the yard work he did for me in her face. It was all very strange and very surreal. Basically, Ryan had been obsessing over me for months. He became delusional and had created a whole relationship between me and him in his mind. It was all in his head, and obviously he was the one that was breaking into my home when I was gone. The visits. Why he did it. I still haven't pieced that 100% together. He never took anything, and I imagine he was mowing my grass because that was his little way of taking care of me. Anyway, by the end of the call, I decided to go to the police department in person to file a report about Ryan. I thought at the very least that this was harassment and I needed it documented. Maybe I could get a restraining order. Mary offered to provide an official statement to the police as well, and I thanked her. The police department took our statements and the harassment complaint was filed, although I couldn't get a PO based off my statement alone. I had no hard proof. The officer did assure me that he would personally go talk to Ryan. I then went straight to the diner to inform my boss, Chase, of the situation. Now, Chase took this very seriously. Just that morning, a third shift waitress actually brought up to Chase how a man came into the diner very early, around 4 a.m. This man was trying to get her to tell him which days I'd be working that week. She told Chase it made her uncomfortable. So, when I told Chase about Ryan, he went back and looked at the cameras from that morning. Sure enough, the man that was bothering third shift for info about me was Ryan. So, Chase initiated the process through corporate to get a permanent ban on Ryan from the diner. It was approved at a later date. I was scheduled to work the following day, and I was nervous throughout my entire shift. But thankfully, Ryan didn't show up. Nor did he show up the following day or the next day after that. All was quiet at my home as well. The officer showing up at Ryan's house to speak with him must have spooked him enough to stop. Weeks, then months went by. No Ryan in sight. No vandalism at my home. No mysteriously mown grass. Nothing. My life had gone completely back to normal. But things changed again in October. October 5th, 2015, it was around 8 p.m. My son Chris fell asleep on the couch while watching a movie. I had dozed off as well until I heard a few very light knocks at my front door. I then walked to the kitchen and looked out the only window that faces my driveway. No cars were there except my own. So I figured that light tapping I heard at my door was either just the TV or my half-asleep brain playing tricks on me. I then returned to the couch and started playing a game on my phone. About 5 minutes later, I heard a few light knocks on my door again. This time I was wide awake, so I knew my brain wasn't playing tricks, so I walked back over to my kitchen window to double check the driveway to see who was there. Again, my car was the only one on the driveway. Right as I go to close the kitchen window blinds, loud knocking suddenly erupts at my front door. And I mean loud, like angry banging. I guess my instincts kicked in and I sprinted to the couch. I scooped Chris up into my arms and ran down the hallway to his bedroom. I did the only thing I could think of in that fraction of a moment. He was groggy and confused, but he listened to my instructions. Get under your bed, stay under it, and don't come out until I tell you to. I then ran to my kitchen and grabbed a knife while dialing 911. I actually screamed at the door that I was calling the police in hopes that it would scare them away. I positioned myself at the end of the hallway which connects my son's room to the living room. This way I'd have a clear view of both the front door in front of me and my son's bedroom doorway behind me. As the operator picked up my call, the banging on my front door was getting even louder. 911 said she was dispatching police right away. She instructed me to stay on the line until they arrived. About 12 minutes into the call, the banging got more violent, rattling pictures off the wall. I thought for sure that they would break my door down at any moment. 911 asked me where I was located in the home, and I told her. She asked me if I could hide somewhere, and she told me not to put myself in danger. In that tiny moment, I felt enraged. Hello. No, I'm not going to hide. I'm not taking my eyes off my son's bedroom under any circumstance. Where are the cops? And besides, I live in a small trailer and the only hiding place for an adult is my bedroom closet. I'd be easily found. So I just erupted over the phone. Look, lady, I'm a single mom. I have no man, no gun, and no place to hide. If he breaks the door down, what am I supposed to do? Throw this knife at him? Where are the cops? She assured me again that the cops were on their way and to stay on the line. More banging, but this time it moved to the actual side of the trailer. It sounded like they were taking a baseball bat and beating it against the outside of the trailer. At that moment, Chris started shrieking. I ran the few steps over into his room to check on him. The loud commotion had just pushed his fear gauge over the edge. He was screaming and crying incessantly under his bed. I quickly ascertained that he was physically okay, and I returned back to the end of the hallway to check on the front door. As I was explaining to the police that my son was okay, just scared, I noticed that the banging had suddenly stopped. I waited for another minute or so, trying to listen out for any sign of further escalation, like window breaking or anything. All I could hear were cries coming from my son's room. All in all, it took the cops 23 minutes to arrive. By then, the perpetrator was long gone. For reference, I live about 10 minutes away from the police station. 911 even called it in as an active home invasion. I was livid about the response time. My front door was made out of some type of metal, just a cheap generic trailer door. It's now covered in dents. There were noticeable scratch marks on the lock. Failed attempt at picking the deadbolt. The siding on the trailer was damaged where the perpetrator had hit it with something. Given the history, I immediately suspected it was Ryan. The police said since I didn't actually see the person, they couldn't arrest him without a witness. The most they could do was make a report. They did end up canvassing the immediate area in case he was on foot, since I didn't see a vehicle in my driveway prior to this happening. However, there was no sign of him or anyone around and about. I deduced that he probably had parked nearby out of sight, that his vehicle wouldn't be spotted or recognized at my home. My home is situated next to a thin patch of woods that have public access roads on the other side. I also am absolutely convinced that Ryan had nefarious plans for me that evening, but when he discovered my son was at home with me, via his terrified shrieking, he bailed. He stopped trying to break into my home the moment my son inadvertently made his presence known. For whatever reason, Ryan always lit up when I talked about my son. He used to initiate conversations about Chris just to watch me dote over him. Looking back, I guess it was his morbid way of bonding with my child, and I think in his own warped way, he grew to care about him. So when he heard Chris scream, he decided not to follow through with whatever his plan was for me. I ended up taking a few days off of work because I was so shaken up. I stayed at my parents' house during that time because I was afraid to go home. My landlord had the damaged door replaced while I was gone. Realizing that I had a job and a life and that I couldn't stay gone forever, I knew that I had to go home. So I got a gun, a small caliber revolver, but it would do the job. And then I went home. I lived in that trailer for another 4 months before I saved up enough money to move. It was totally peaceful during those months, with no further events or altercations. But I just couldn't stand being there anymore. Since then I have changed jobs, met somebody special, gotten engaged, bought a house, and got a dog. No further sign of Ryan anywhere during any of these life changes. It's been nearly 7 years since any sign of him. Ryan seems to have disappeared out of my life in the same manner he first appeared, out of nowhere, and I couldn't be happier that he's gone. Hopefully it stays that way. I used to do DoorDash on the side, just for some extra cash. Nothing crazy. Until a few months ago when something happened that I still can't stop thinking about. And to be honest, I haven't done a single delivery since. It was around 11 p.m. and I was finishing up my last order for the night. The delivery was in a quiet upscale LA neighborhood. Nothing out of the ordinary. I pull up, leave the car running like I always do, grab the food and drop it off. Super normal and no weird vibes from the customer or anything. But as I walk back to my car, something feels off. I can't explain it, but the air felt heavier, like I could sense something was wrong before I even got to the door. I get in the driver's seat, close the door, and glance in the rearview mirror. That's when I see him. There's a guy sitting in my back seat, just sitting there, hoodie pulled low over his face, completely still. My heart stopped. I was frozen, staring at him through the mirror, trying to figure out how the heck he got in my car. I managed to stammer out, "Can I help you?" And that's when he leans forward just a little bit and I can finally see his eyes. They were wide and bloodshot, like he hadn't slept for days. He leans back again and, in the calmest voice, says, "Drive." I don't get why, but I did. I started driving with my mind racing, trying to figure out what to do. He didn't say anything else, just sat there completely calm, while I drove through these dark streets, and I'm just freaking out inside, thinking this is it and this is how I'm going to get robbed or worse. Then he tells me to turn down a side street. It's dark, barely any street lights, and I'm just thinking, this is where it's going to go down. But right as we approach a gas station that's well lit and a few people around, I slam on the brakes, throw the car in park, and jump out screaming for help. The gas station clerk runs out and I'm yelling that there's a guy in my back seat. But when we go back to the car, it's empty. The guy was gone. No sign of him anywhere. He just vanished. I have no idea how he got out so fast or where he went, but I didn't care. I got back in my car, locked the doors, and drove straight home. I've replayed that night over and over in my head, and it still doesn't make sense. That was months ago, and I haven't touched the DoorDash app since. I don't know if I ever will. It's not worth risking something like that happening again. This happened about a month ago, and it still comes up in conversation because we genuinely just don't know what happened or was about to happen to us. Posting this story here to hear your thoughts and ideas. It was around 7 p.m. in November, so it was past dark in Metro Detroit. I was driving and my fiance was riding passenger. We were exiting a pretty populated highway when we turned onto a mile road near the city's shopping mall and outlet centers. Being in close proximity to the mall, it was strange the boulevard was that empty at that time of night. So we were driving on the deserted westbound side of the boulevard when we noticed that there was a stopped running vehicle in the middle lane. Again, it was dark aside from the street lights that line the road every 80 yards or so, but their brake lights were obviously lit and we were approaching quickly. My fiance and I were talking in the car at the time when we both kind of stopped to verbally question what we were both seeing. It was definitely strange behavior, especially since the speed limit is 45 to 50 miles per hour on this mile-long road. You don't want to be stopped, especially this close to people exiting the highway, so we slowed down since we were cautious drivers. We approached and passed the vehicle in the far left lane as it was in the middle, and when we were about a car length in front of it, the driver gunned it and started speeding up to catch us. We never left our left-hand lane, but at this point I was braking, because again, the behavior was off and we noticed their driving was sporadic. Braking was almost instinctual as much as it probably wasn't safe to do so. Continuing to drive down this mile-long road, still no traffic. We can see in either direction. We noticed the driver was swerving their car between the middle lane and the left lane, as if trying to intentionally sideswipe us. Instant red flag, obviously. It wasn't like the driver was intoxicated or texting and just doing a poor job to stay in their lane. This was a driver in control of their swerving and coming dangerously close to hitting the side of my Jeep, going about 45 miles per hour. Bad vibes. Before we knew it, we were blinded by a spotlight coming from the driver's window into my car, via the passenger window. I have 20 tints on my Jeep windows, which usually help control the brightness of the sun most mornings and evenings, and even with the tints, this spotlight stunned us, and we couldn't see anything but white. I didn't have time to check my mirrors before slamming on my brakes. Not sure I would have even been able to see my mirrors after being blinded. I remember my fiance screaming, "What the F?" We opened our eyes and the driver was yards ahead of us, speeding to get away. I had my fiance dial 911 immediately. I don't take BS, so I started racing down the road to catch up to him for a license plate number. In Michigan, we have Michigan left turn lanes, and I could see the vehicle up ahead turning into one to enter the mall parking lot, which is a huge roundabout. The roundabout speed limit is approximately 25 miles per hour with frequent stop signs and intersections. My fiance connected with dispatch on the phone as I was trying to desperately catch up to the vehicle. They were blowing every red light and stop sign in sight. Dispatch recommended we don't follow, but I kind of did anyways because I was really upset and committed to grabbing their plate number, but from a safe distance and at a safe speed. No way was I going to tail this person when we didn't know if they had a weapon or something. Long story short, this driver knew we were following them and they were speeding through the roundabout, cutting drivers off and blowing intersections when we lost sight of them. At this point, the police said the cops in the area were already on their way, looking for the vehicle we described and that we should leave it to them. We weren't going to jeopardize our safety and the safety of other drivers. So we stopped our chase, but still crossed an intersection into another shopping center across the street. We saw the driver enter. We figured we could prowl instead of chase in case we saw them again. We never found that car again. Never found out who that driver was, what his motive was, or if the cops found him. We knew it was a male driver because we saw him through his driver's side window before he blinded us. White male, dark baseball hat, and he drove a dark sedan that looked like a newer Ford Fusion. It was a close run-in, and I'm not sure what would have happened if he had successfully crashed into us on that deserted mile road, or if his spotlight had successfully veered my car off the road. We don't think this was a case of road rage since we didn't really do anything to provoke him. To the dude who scared the crap out of us and took away our eyesight while driving a motor vehicle. Middle finger emoji. Edit. A Michigan left refers to a type of turn where left turns at an intersection are not allowed. Instead, to turn left, you must drive straight or turn right onto the perpendicular road, then make a U-turn at a median crossover. And a mile road is part of Michigan's naming convention for differentiating common parallel roads in the metro area and facilitating easy navigation of the region. Dating back to 1815. 37 of these roads, spaced 1 mile apart, exist between downtown Detroit and the northern boundary of Macomb County. The most well-known mile road would be the infamous 8 Mile. When I was 16 or 17, I was coming home to Brooklyn from a movie in Manhattan with my friends. I was the only one who lived in Brooklyn, so I walked home from the train alone. I was used to being out late by myself. I had a midnight curfew, but I frequently broke it because I thought nothing bad would ever happen to me, despite an uptick of crime in our neighborhood at the time. This night, however, I was actually trying to get home on time for once. It was the summer after I graduated high school and I was feeling amazing. I had a little to drink and a little to smoke, and I was feeling on top of the world. It was so hot out. I remember what I was wearing. It was like this long sheer cape thing with a very tight and revealing little dress underneath. Not that anything would have probably been different if I'd been wearing shorts and a t-shirt. However, because of my fun outfit, I was feeling myself and being stupid, taking selfies while I walked down the streets and listening to music with both headphones in, not paying any attention to my surroundings. I think I even sang as I walked. I got to my building after finishing my 10-minute walk from the train and walked up the steps to our apartment. We live in a brownstone, with apartments in it, and ours was on the 3rd floor. We had a gate at the bottom of the steps separating us from the sidewalk. I pulled out my headphones and began to fumble with my keys at the top of the steps. Just as I had found the correct key, still humming to myself and thinking about my great night, I heard the latch on the gate clank as if it were being opened. I turned around and I saw a man standing at the gate staring up at me. He was young, probably early 20s, wearing a gray hoodie with the hood up, covering part of his face, but I could see his eyes, and immediately I knew something was off because of how blank yet nervous his expression was. One hand was on the handle of the gate as if he were about to open it completely, but he stopped once I turned around. Somehow my fight or flight instinct didn't kick in yet. It was probably the alcohol. I cautiously called down, "Can I help you?" And he didn't respond. I looked him over more closely and realized that his other hand, the one not on the gate, was moving, fast and low, near his waist. I registered that he was touching himself, gasped, and within milliseconds he was sprinting up the stairs behind me, reaching out to grab me. My brain clicked into place and I started screaming at the top of my lungs as I jammed my key into the door and slammed it behind me. I ran up the stairs screaming for my dad, not even stopping to make sure the door was locked, thinking that if he followed me upstairs, he'd soon be met by my very tall father and our very loud dogs, who slept in the bedroom right next to our apartment door. As I looked over my shoulder while tearing my way upstairs, I saw his face pressed up against the glass window, still watching, but now his eyes were furious. I ran into our apartment, still screaming to my parents to call the police. My dad went downstairs and looked around, but he was gone. The police came anyways after my mom called and came upstairs to take my statement so they could make the report. The two cops who showed up asked me to describe him. I did, and they said they would cruise around looking for him, and regardless of if he was found, a detective would call me soon to make a more detailed report. They never called me. There were many more rapes and assaults that continued to take place in my neighborhood for the rest of the summer. I shudder every time I think about what would have happened if I hadn't taken out my headphones before I began unlocking my door. I don't know how long he was following me for, and as far as I know, he was never caught. From that point on, for the last few weeks before I left for college, I would call my dad and make him meet me at the train station so he could walk me home safely. Now, as an adult, I'm far more cautious than I was as a teenager, of course. I'm always extra aware of my surroundings, especially at night, and I don't look at my phone while I walk home. I'll never get the image of his blank stare as he lunged towards me out of my head, and I'll never forget the feeling in the pit of my stomach as I realized that he followed me home, watching me and doing what he was doing to himself, and was now waiting to strike. It was like being a deer realizing it's being stalked by a tiger because the tiger accidentally stepped on a twig and gave itself away right before it could pounce on its prey. I-22 female was on vacation in San Antonio with a friend for New Year's. In retrospect, I would have picked anywhere else to celebrate, but I had never been to San Antonio before, so I thought it would be cool. When we pull up to the place, it's very obvious it's not in a great neighborhood, but it was extremely cheap and within walking distance to the Riverwalk. I'm no stranger to questionable neighborhoods, so I wasn't too concerned about the area as it was very quiet. On the day of New Year's Eve, my friend got food poisoning and asked me to get them some stuff from the gas station down the road. I wasn't comfortable taking their truck, and since it was only an 8-minute walk, I started heading out. Got to the gas station, no problem, but they didn't have any Pedialyte, so I started walking to another gas station only 5 minutes away or so. This is where it gets sketchy. I'm halfway to the gas station, and I noticed there are two homeless guys walking around outside their tents next to the street I'm on. Originally, I was going to walk right past them and pay them no mind, but when I got closer, I could tell that they noticed me and were staring at me hard. I'm 5'5", not super athletic, pretty strong, but I'm not taking my chances with two grown men. Instead of going straight past them, I turned the corner. I assumed they would go about their business and leave me alone. I hear one of them say, "Hey Randy, come over here," and I glance behind me and see 3 men now following me. They're far enough away that I'm not worried, but extremely cautious. I glance behind me again after a few minutes and they're hunched over, huddled up like they're trying to sneak up on me, much closer this time. I make the smart decision to say, screw the Pedialyte, and round the corner back towards our place. I'm maybe 1 to 2 blocks away when I check behind me again, and they have also rounded the corner and are walking quickly. I start booking it, and I hear the men behind me yelling at me. I didn't look back this time, but I could hear shuffling feet breaking into a run. Thankfully, I made it inside before they could see where I went. I peeked out the peephole in the door and watched in horror as these 3 men came barreling around the corner and frantically looked around for me. They are arguing and pointing around, but eventually they screw off. If I weren't so alert, I shudder to think what would have happened, and no, I didn't get the Pedialyte. I had to get it delivered. This happened around the very early 70s. My family, including my uncle by marriage, were all born and raised in a tiny area in the deep south. This story is told at family reunions, etc., and I have full permission from my aunt and uncle to tell this, but I will not reveal any information such as where they are from and stuff like that. My uncle went away and fought in Vietnam, returned home, and with my aunt, my dad's older sister, was married. While my uncle was in Nam, he said when something bad was going to happen, like something awful to one of his friends over there, or when there was a bad battle with his company, he could almost feel it. He said there would be this terrible sense of dread. Sometimes he would have that dread, like a burden for a week or so before anything happened. Sometimes it would be an hour or so, or anywhere in between. So here goes the story. It was January or February, and the weather had been unseasonably warm that year. My aunt and uncle had only been married for a few months, and He was going out of town the following day after this incident happened. Job related. He'd be gone for 2 weeks. He and my aunt were not looking forward to being apart, so it was a Sunday and they decided to make the day special. He went to church with her, which was something he rarely did, and they decided to splurge and eat at one of the great seafood restaurants, and afterwards, they were going to walk on the beach. My aunt said they were having a great time, seeing old friends at the church, and the restaurant was really good. It was just one of those days where everything seemed right. On the way to the beach they were headed to, my uncle said he began having that same sense of dread that he had when he was in Vietnam. He didn't want to spoil my aunt's fun, so he thought it was like what they call PTSD. Back then it was called a flashback. He was trying to not take it seriously, but he said the sense of foreboding was bad. They got to the beach. To explain something about this particular beach, you had to park beside the road and walk across the wide expanse of sand to get to the water, and this beach was very secluded, especially in winter. My aunt was walking in her stocking feet, collecting shells and having a great time. She loved the beach and still does. They saw another young couple walking also. My aunt and uncle didn't know them. They seemed like late teens in age. Anyways, my uncle said he couldn't fight that bad feeling any longer. He finally grabbed my aunt by the arm and said, "Let's get out of here." She got mad and wasn't ready to go yet, and he was dragging her across the sand towards their car, and they were arguing the whole way. He didn't tell her what was wrong because he even felt like he was probably having a flashback, but he said he felt 100% better when they were in the car and headed home, and my aunt got over being mad. My aunt and uncle said a big car, which had 4 hippie-type guys in it, passed them on the road heading to the beach. Anyway, the story in the newspaper was the following day. My uncle realized why he was having such a bad feeling. These 4 guys kidnapped this guy and girlfriend. Guys were actually local men, and my aunt and uncle had gone to school with a couple of them. The 4 guys were on some kind of drugs. Remember the time in history this was, and they put the guy in the trunk and they took this woman out and assaulted her for hours. They had a gun and kidnapped them from the beach at gunpoint. This shocked the area because it was a very low crime area. If my aunt and uncle had stayed at the beach, there is no telling what could have happened to her, and they would have probably shot him, because he would have fought to try and give her a chance to get away. The law had been looking for these 4 guys all day because the guys had gotten into some other mischief the day before, so the law had a description of them in their vehicle. Hi, I am a female entering my senior year in high school. I've been lurking on this sub for a few days and found myself wondering how the heck so many people have had scary run-ins with such horrible people, but then I realized that I know so many creeps and terrible people myself when I think about it. One in particular has been on my mind lately. I will refer to him under the alias as Kyle. I grew up with him, we're the same age, and have gone to school with each other our entire lives. I have recently found out he has committed a disgusting crime. I'll elaborate on that later, that I did not consider him capable of. I figured to be that messed up, you have to show signs, but I never saw it coming. I thought I would walk you through my childhood with him. Forgive the length of this. I tend to stretch my stories out and I'm sick of keeping this inside. My first notable encounter with Kyle takes place in the 1st grade. He and I were friends, as much weight as that carries when you're 6. Our teacher that year was a hot mess, really. She was all over the place and it allowed far too much to slip under the radar. One day, Kyle had successfully managed to hide in the classroom while the rest of us went to lunch. His absence was not noticed until after. I was the first to return to the class, only to find Kyle holding my beloved Littlest Pet Shop backpack, which appeared to be cut up. I approach him, who was holding my now unusable bag in one of his hands with a pair of scissors in the other. I address the elephant in the room and ask him, did you just cut my backpack? To which he responds, no, scissors still in hand. He ended up in trouble and was forced to apologize. I never really cared afterwards, and we remained on good terms. I always looked back upon this story and laughed, nothing more. A couple of years later, we are still friends and sit next to each other. I and Kyle seem to get along quite well, bonding over our maladjustment and detachment from the learning environment. For me, this could be attributed to severe anxiety and ADHD, but for him, it was something more concerning later to emerge. He was a bad influence for sure, but I was lonely and felt estranged from the girls my age, which led me to socialize with a lot of boys. I felt comfortable because of the crude nature and normalization of violence amongst a lot of these young boys, which is really questionable when I type it out loud. It makes you rethink the societal roles gender plays. He drew gory stick figure fights and crude cartoons, but it seems so normal in the context of other boys at that age. I and Kyle could talk about zombies and action movies and make internet jokes. I thought he was cool and edgy. I had always struggled with math and found it hard to focus, but he made it worse this particular year. He would sit there and tear pieces of paper from his math workbook and then eat them. I once asked the question with the obvious answer, "Are you eating paper right now?" He told me to try it too, so I did. We sat there like lunatics and competed to see who could chew and swallow the largest chunk of paper. How we got away with this is just beyond me. I also told this story in good humor due to how obscure it is. Stupid antics continued and recess roughhousing ensued. Now we are preteens about to enter middle school. I began to reconnect with my female friends and spent more and more time with them in conjunction with my male friends. Kyle had come out as bisexual and later pansexual, and this is where we began to drift. I was raised in a very conservative household and I didn't support LGBTQ rights. I never mistreated my friends who identified this way, probably because I was closeted, but still did not agree with the idea. Kyle and I remained friends but didn't talk much. He was still constantly getting in trouble in school and acting immaturely as other boys began to grow out of their hyperactivity and aggression. In middle school, it surfaced that many guys were made to feel uncomfortable by Kyle's attraction to them when they did not reciprocate. I think we all ignorantly dismissed that as homophobia without the context available now. We hardly talked, let alone about our feelings, but I noticed him growing increasingly depressed and estranged from everybody else. He had become a very disagreeable person and didn't get along with a lot of people in our grade. He was still considered cool and funny to an extent, but I was growing up and beginning to enjoy being a teen with my own life. Other than snarky chuckles and remarks here and there, his demeanor was dull and slightly cold. In high school, I didn't see him at all. I was close with people close to him and heard about him, but we didn't communicate nor have classes together. During our freshman year, maybe even our early sophomore year, I'm not exactly sure, Kyle got into big trouble with administration. He had brought a realistic-looking assault-style BB gun to school in his backpack. In the morning before school started, he invited a few people to his locker to see the fully loaded weapon. I have no clue what on earth he expected to happen or why he wanted to bring it to school, but people quickly caught wind of the contents of his bag and it was confiscated and he was suspended. Tidbits of information like that popped up in conversations, usually followed by a "what the heck is wrong with him?" But he was nothing more than some jerk that I used to do stupid stuff with and get in trouble with. I really didn't think of this kid at all until a few months ago at work, when it happened to discover that my new coworker was also Kyle's sister-in-law. I always knew that he had a large family with tons of older siblings, but I hardly interacted with any of them because they were so much older than us. I only worked with this woman for maybe a month, but I can tell you that she's an absolute sweetheart. We talked about the exciting news for a recent positive pregnancy test and the little boy she had to come. Then we reached the topic of Kyle. At the time, I was oblivious to his recent crime, as it was not publicly released information. I told her stories, including the first two I told you guys, all while laughing. She laughed too, then trailed off and said, "Yeah, he doesn't like me much at all." I think it became the worst when he was figuring out his sexuality. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I remember that phase." We both kind of laughed and moved on. She asked me if we still talked and I told her no, but I still hear funny stories about him around school. Her smile faded and she looked as if she wanted to say something else about him, but she changed the subject. It is apparent she is uncomfortable with Kyle and I feel bad for talking to him almost fondly, even if I have no clue what has just happened. I didn't even know that he had been placed in a mental institution, let alone notice he was gone. Once she realized I hadn't heard, I don't think she wanted to be the one to break the news to me. I never brought him up to her again. We arrive at the present, well, almost. Last month, I and a friend were talking about this other creep in our friend group who keeps trying to assault people in their sleep at parties. This dude is seriously deranged, like, I fear who he will grow up to be is kind of deranged. And my friend made a joke comparing this dude to Kyle, and I laughed. She elaborated more and expressed her disgust with him, talking about Kyle, and I realized I was missing the full context, so I asked her why she felt that strongly. She told me that he had recently assaulted his younger stepsister and was taken into custody for it. This was a powerless little kid we were talking about, within their own home presumably more than once. Apparently, he's become more of a danger with violent tendencies, a full-blown creep that harasses and assaults those he can take advantage of. There are other people he has harmed, and there will be more, I'm sure. He craves power. People like this don't just grow out of it, it worsens. I mentioned my age in my intro deliberately because something about how young he is creeps me out even more. Knowing that he is free and still mentally unwell, able to carry on and do something worse. I was actually shocked when I heard this because I didn't think he was capable of doing something like this, especially being a child and his little sister. In retrospect, I can see he was different, but I didn't see any of it as concerning at the time. He finished the school year in person. He walks the same halls I do. The worst part is only a small handful of people know about the little sister thing. I only know because my friend is dating one of Kyle's former best friends, and she couldn't stand carrying the burden of this knowledge, so she swore me to secrecy. Of course, Kyle acts as if it never happened, and it didn't carry any weight to him. He told a couple of his now ex-close friends what he did, like it means nothing to him. I see my peers talk to him like normal, and they are completely oblivious to truly know how weird he is. If you read or listened to this whole thing, thanks. I'm sick of holding this information inside. I need to let it out somewhere, if not with my friends at school. My name is Angelina. This happened in 2012 when I was only 15. I am my mom's only daughter. When I was born, my mom had just married my father, and to preserve his real name, I'll call him John. When John discovered my mom's pregnancy, who we will call Grace, he freaked out. He started treating my mom badly. He probably cheated on her too. But Grace didn't want me to not have a dad, so she tried to hold on to the relationship. Until I was born and John filed for divorce, and then he left town. My mom raised me alone with a lot of effort. John had moved to another city and sometimes sent me gifts for my birthdays. I thought it was really cute, and I really wanted that one day I could meet him. I didn't know he was a bad person until all this happened. Days before my 15th birthday, John showed up, much to our surprise. Without asking my mom for permission, he arrived with a backpack full of his clothes, saying he wanted to spend my birthday week with me. Grace was surprised but still hated him because she didn't even ask for permission, and she didn't want to see his face. I didn't know why, and I invited him to sleep in my room. In fact, he's my dad. What's wrong? I didn't even think about his actions. The whole time he was looking at me, crazy. So far, so good. He slept on the floor with a lot of covers. The day before my birthday, my bed broke, and I was going to sleep with my mom, but John asked me to sleep with him together on the floor because he wanted to wake up with me congratulating him. I thought the idea was cool and agreed. At night, I put on my pajamas and lied down next to him, and just when I laid down, he pretended to be asleep, and then I fell asleep too. A few hours later, I woke up feeling liquid on my skin. When I opened my eyes, my dad was masturbating in front of me and on my stomach. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I realized I was out of my pajamas and blushed with embarrassment. Just when he realized that I was going to scream, John covered my mouth and tied my hands with a rope that spread on the floor. He withdrew his hand from my mouth and told me to be silent. He was going to get a knife from the kitchen. I had no choice, so I dragged myself to the window and screamed for my mom. John and Grace automatically heard. I went behind the closed door to prevent him from entering. My mom's room faces the kitchen, so when she opened the door, she came across my dad naked in the kitchen with my pajamas on his shoulder. She recognized them and took the knife out of his hand. John was unresponsive and ran out of the house, even naked and in my clothes at dawn. Grace called the police, and they found John on a street very close to our house, running desperately with my pajamas covering his face so he wouldn't be recognized. What we didn't know is he had mental problems and was once arrested for trying to assault a girl in the city where he lived. I spent hours in that room crying. To this day, I am traumatized and have nightmares about it, but couldn't live in that house any longer, much less celebrate my birthday. We moved to a place further away from there. I spent a lot of time going to the psychologist, but I'm not 100% recovered from it. We don't know where John is anymore, but I still prefer not to know any more about him. I joined Reddit recently and would like to share this with you, and I hope nothing like this ever happens to any of you. It's horrible, and even today I can't get over it. Sorry this is a bit long. I know this isn't a therapist's office, but this has bothered me for a long time, and I wanted to get it off my chest. This happened in June 2018 in Portland, Oregon. I understand I acted like an idiot in this situation. Since then, I've become more observant, cautious, and honestly much more paranoid. I went dancing with my friends and was really drunk by midnight. Unfortunately, this was back when I had little money, and I realized you could save money by eating very little before going out, and it would take far fewer drinks to get drunk. So I was so drunk I barely remember my friend ordering me an Uber home. My phone was dead, of course. I can vaguely recall them helping me get into the car and telling me to get home safe. I don't remember greeting the driver or the first minute or so, but soon after getting in, he asked how my night was and if I smoked. Honestly, I was just thinking about bed at this point, so I sort of just slurred out that I did sometime. He then offered me a joint, and this is the first moment I get sort of nervous and begin paying attention. I tell him something like I'm really tired and just ready to get home. I think he said something about it being an indica-based joint and it was made perfect for sleep. Once again, I say something like not exactly, no, but not a yes, which he takes as a yes. I'll take that joint now. Once again, I'm still drunk enough I can barely see straight or speak clearly, so when he says, "Okay, well, I have to cancel the ride really quick because I can't give it to you while I'm on the clock," or something to that effect. It takes me a second to realize how dangerous that is, and by the time I start to say something, he has canceled the ride and pulls over. We were in an area just east of the Hawthorne Bridge, I think, and it was totally secluded. Some empty parking lots, a closed auto body shop, and nobody in sight. It's starting to hit me. I'm now in the car, not with an Uber driver, but with some stranger. I can't call anyone, and he's trying to give me weed that could have anything in it. For the next minute or so, we're pretty quiet, or I just can't remember any small talk he tried to make because I was beginning to panic. And every time he handed me the joint, I would take fake hits, just breathing it into my mouth and not into my lungs. I felt tired, clumsy, and weak. That kind of drunk where you're almost at the point of nausea, and I knew I couldn't do much of anything to defend myself at that point. I remember vividly being fixated for a moment on the fact I didn't even have a pair of keys to defend myself with, as my building used fobs for just about everything, and I didn't take my mail key with me. As I'm freaking out, I look up to see if this guy is sort of noticing, and I make eye contact with him in the mirror. He was staring, but I couldn't read his expression. Finally, he says something along the lines of, "Well, let's get out of here." I tell him I'll just call another Uber to get home, thinking at this point it might even be safer to walk, and he says, "No, I still have your address. I'll just take you." For a moment I was relieved. I guess I wanted to believe him so badly that I would get home safe. I believed him. I tried to calm myself down, thinking he hadn't actually done anything threatening. Maybe he was just your typical stoner guy and I was overreacting. This time I lived on the PSU campus in downtown Portland, in the southwest area of the city. He is driving me north on the east side of the river. There are several bridges to our left, and as he keeps moving north, he has several opportunities to take an exit to hop over the river and get me back downtown. He keeps skipping them. We keep passing bridge after bridge that could get me home. Up in northeast Portland, there are some large industrial areas that can get very isolated at night, and Portland in general is surrounded by lots of forests, so I knew he could have me in a secluded area really quick. After he passes like the fourth exit for a bridge, pretty sure it was the Broadway Bridge, I've been racking my brain for a way to make him actually take me home and say something to the effect of, "Hey, my boyfriend is waiting for me at home," which was true, though I said it in a very meek way. My driver says nothing, but he did take the next exit for a bridge and basically hung a giant U-turn that started taking me home. Even as we are on the west side of town heading south, I'm still shaking and have my hand on the door handle, thinking about just hopping out at a red light the closer we get to my apartment. My phone is completely dead, and he honestly still has several chances to hop onto nearby highways and speed out of the city. We're getting pretty close to my apartment now, and I'm once again trying to convince myself I'm being paranoid about some stoner that can't navigate the city. Although a few minutes before I was so scared I was crying. So once we get about 2 blocks from my apartment, I lie and tell him it's easiest to stop here and he can let me out. Again, he doesn't say anything but does slow the car. I'm flooded with relief and even feel myself smile, but when I go to open the door, it's locked. I try to lift the lock mechanism manually, but it won't budge. I look up at him instinctually to see what was up, and he's got his head turned almost fully towards me, shoulders still facing the road, smiling at me. The worst smile I've ever seen in my life. It looked so mocking, and it just did not reach his eyes at all. I just started crying and asking him to open the door. I was so freaked out and still very drunk, and thankfully he did. I will never forget the sensation of vulnerability, not just being drunk in his car with no way to contact anyone. But even as I got out of the car, I kept feeling like he would somehow grab the back of my shirt and pull me back in, as weird as that might sound. When I got home, I find out that my boyfriend had actually gone out with friends last minute and wasn't even home. He wouldn't even have known till much later if I hadn't gotten back safe. The next day I convinced myself I was freaking out over nothing, which I realized still could be the case, but in my gut I had truly felt in danger the night before. Technically this guy could have been totally harmless, but I think I should have texted my friend and had her report him. The big thing that made me think of this was recently hearing about how Ed Kemper, co-ed killer, would go for practice runs picking up hitchhikers and seeing if he could get the passenger or potential victims to trust him, or how far out of his comfort zone he could push them without them saying anything. Obviously this guy wasn't Ed Kemper, but I hate wondering if that night was a practice run of sorts for my Uber driver. Thanks to whoever reads through this or listens to the whole thing. I'm at a point in my life where I'm realizing how much danger I put myself in when I was younger and just depressed as hell, and it made me both surprised and deeply grateful I'm still here. So I was a security guard for this local company in my area. I was assigned to a water park with another guard who was regularly there keeping watch. He was to train me and show me around and tell me what codes open what doors. I first noticed how quick he was to enter and leave the property. He never wanted to spend more than 10 minutes inside the property before he'd be eager to leave. Our first night was simple. There was nothing exciting or interesting going on, so our night dragged. After a few hours, I asked him if he'd experienced anything unusual while working there. He told me that he's had some problems with people trying to enter the property without permission, but that was about it. He also told me he hated working there because of his encounters with these people. He said they creeped him out because of how sneaky they were. He didn't really want to tell me much because he was afraid I would leave the post. That should have been a red flag for me, but I was too excited to let anything like that scare me. A few more hours later and our shift is over, so we clock out and go home for the day. The next night, my boss calls me to explain that the security guard, my partner, had resigned. I was a little upset because now I was to work a two-man post all by myself with barely any knowledge of the place. Fast forward a few weeks, I started to get the hang of the place and created my own routine with no issues at all. No break-ins, vandalism, or anything. It's now 2 a.m. and I was outside at the front of the property completing my rounds when I heard a door slam from inside. I jumped because of how loud it was. As I started to walk back into the property, I could hear doors opening and closing. I could also feel myself getting nervous because it was my first situation I've ever had at this place like this. As I walk inside and start to check the doors and complete a round to make sure there is nobody on the property, I get to this corridor where there is a set of stairs that leads down to a door that is wide open. I walk down the stairs to close and lock the door because I was too scared to take a look inside. As I turned around to head back up the stairs, I noticed a man dressed in all black standing at the top. I take a step back and realize I'm cornered. If he were to try anything, I'd have nowhere to run or hide. So I politely ask him if he needs any help. He didn't reply. I then asked him how he got into the property, and he didn't say a word. He slowly turned his head and snapped his fingers, and then from the left side of the staircase, another man slowly crawled to the side like a dog on all fours. I then turned around and kicked the door open and ran inside and locked myself in a bathroom, as I called my boss and told him what I witnessed. They set an armed security guard to my position to complete a walkthrough to make sure I was safe. As I got the call that the area was clear, I came out and told them everything from the start to finish. I realized that they didn't believe me, so I clocked out and went home for the night. The next morning, I received a call from my boss, explaining that they checked the security footage from the night before, and what they told me horrified me. Every hour, when I would complete my rounds inside the property, those same two men would follow me through the facility as if they were stalking me, like as if it were a game to them. After that, I asked for a new position because I was too horrified to work at that water park. I now know why my trainer didn't want to work there anymore. This actually happened to me, and I have more creepy stories like this one from when I was working security, so please let me know if you want to listen to more. I got you. When I was 20, I was a young man living large in my first kind of crappy apartment in downtown Atlanta. I was in a committed relationship with my 19-year-old girlfriend, and she would sleep over basically every night, and since we were in the throes of young romance, obviously we slept naked. Everything was great. One night, still groggy from sleep, I looked up to see a man in the doorway. Frequently suffer from sleep paralysis and almost immediately thought nothing of it, but unlike with sleep paralysis, I was able to move and rub my eyes. That's when the gravity of the situation set in. Luckily, my girlfriend was fully covered, but I was not even in the slightest, and I instantly felt violated, angry, and protective of my girlfriend, so I grabbed a knife from my bedside table, still naked, and went to investigate, which in hindsight was not the best move. Right outside of my bedroom, there was a shampoo bottle from my bathroom and a mysterious substance on the wall and ground, which thankfully the police identified as just shampoo. I freaked out at all the sight of this, though, because this was when I realized that it was not a sleep paralysis demon, but a real person with whom I, butt naked, made eye contact with as I woke up. He left out the back and took my key with him. It was one of those locks that could only be unlocked from the inside, so he effectively stopped me from seeing him by locking me in and took my only key to my place in one fell swoop. Needless to say, my then girlfriend and I got the heck out of there to another person's apartment and waited for the cops to arrive. By the time they did, all of my electronics were gone. He hit a few of my neighbors' places too, but as far as I can tell, he was never caught. My best friend Amelia, 27 female, and I, 29 female, have reason to suspect that we were drugged on Monday night, October 28, 2019. Names changed. I'm going to go through this whole thing chronologically. This took place at a bar nearby door called Lobby that was hosting a horror night, playing 3 feature horrors with sound each Monday of October. I live about 5 doors down from Lobby. I trusted the bartenders there. They look out for their female patrons and normally have many as a result. It's a funky, nerdy bar, and I know the staff well from living in the neighborhood. The previous Monday, October 21st, 2019, I went to Lobby with my roommate Maria for a horror screening event. She left after the first film, and I moved to the bar and met a guy named Jeff. We talked about horror for hours and seemed to have the beginning of a good connection. Towards the end of the night, I was fairly intoxicated, which was probably evident, as I had trouble remembering his name. I'm not great with names in general, but this was a bit much. He asked to buy me another drink and I declined because I didn't want to get messy. I asked if he was single and for his number. He responded that he was single and put his information in my phone. I followed up the next day and so did he. He suggested going to a movie together and I agreed, but told him I wouldn't be available until next week, but that I would be at next week's horror screening at Lobby. He told me he looked forward to seeing me there. I also invited Amelia. Jeff and I texted a little throughout the week, but not much. He seemed interested. At 7, I showed up to the lobby. I noted I was hungry and left to get food. I returned with a huge pad thai dish that I ate my fill of. I was entirely full. I had no interest or intention of getting intoxicated. I just wanted to watch the films and get to know Jeff a bit better. I also have a high alcohol tolerance because I drink a lot in general, and I've been drinking the previous weekend, further boosting my tolerance. Around 7:20, I had my first beer. It was a stout of 9%, but it was a half pint. Amelia arrived at 8:30 at this point. I had just ordered my second beer, a 7% IPA. When she arrived, she tried a sip of my beer, liked it, and ordered the same. I told her I had food and shared some with her. She had a few bites. I had also ordered a glass of water and had it nearby, but wasn't really drinking it yet. Around 9 or 9:30, Jeff arrived and said hello. He asked if I'd been there for long, and I told him I came for the first movie. He told me he'd been at the lobby for 20 minutes, but I hadn't seen him arrive or sit at the other end of the bar. Amelia was to the right of me, and a regular patron called Jenna was to my left. I was excited to get to know Jeff, more and asked Jen if she would mind swapping seats for a bit. Amelia knew I was interested in this guy too and didn't mind, although she told me later that she didn't like him. She said he came up as having an undue arrogance. Amelia and Jen ended up getting along really well and conversing more intensely. Our drinks were never left completely unattended. Either she or I was there, but I realized that I did get up to pee a couple of times, while Amelia was distracted with Jen, and that's when our drinks could have been drugged. We suspect my water was drugged as it was the only other item we shared, other than the pad thai. I don't remember thinking much of it until later in the night, maybe 10:30 or 10:45. When I drank it, we think she saw it and drank it too. In the end, I had one more beer, another IPA. In total, I had 2 pints of 7% beer and 1/2 pint from the hours of 7 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. on a full stomach. However, around the 10:30 mark, I started to show signs of mild intoxication. By 11 o'clock, more extreme. I don't remember my conversations vividly. There are texts I don't remember sending. Around 11:20 or 11:30, I asked Jeff if he was interested in me because it seemed that he had been the week before, but now I was unsure. I don't remember his exact response, but I know he declined. I think normally this would embarrass me, but I don't remember feeling that upset. I do know that I was unnerved by my level of intoxication and asked for my bill. It was also to the logical point in the night to settle up anyway. I remember looking down at my bill and it was $24. Then I blacked out. My memory flashed back about 15 minutes later. I was walking into my bedroom and Amelia was in my bed. I didn't know how she got there and was surprised to see her. She was passed out. I got into bed and passed out beside her. We were likely in bed by 12 a.m., so everything happened fast after 11. I don't remember how I paid, and I don't remember saying goodbye to Jeff or any other patrons. Don't remember leaving, unlocking my door, greeting my dog, or inviting my best friend up. I just remember looking at my bill and my memory going black. Amelia had 4 IPAs in total over a slightly shorter amount of time, enough to make her buzzed or even drunk, but with her tolerance not enough to mess her up like that. She remembers drinking 4 beers and feeling good, slightly buzzed. Remembers liking Jen and not liking Jeff. She remembers having some of my water. After 3 beers, she got her bill, around 10:30 or 11, with no intention of having more. However, a little while later, she ordered a 4th. That's the last thing she remembers, and she doesn't remember drinking the beer, paying for it, or how she ended up in my bed fully clothed. Thankfully, we were unharmed. My best friend and I presumably left and crashed together. We woke up the next day genuinely baffled about our night and unusually hungover. 2.5 beers has never been enough to make me feel drunk, let alone hungover. Amelia felt the same. While 4 beers was enough to make her feel like a good buzz, it wasn't enough to make her feel that drunk and that unwell the next day. We were both unable to recall any additional details during our blackouts. The hangover, which made us feel nauseated, tired, and confused, lasted the entire following day and night. She experienced a headache as well. We both experienced an exhausting brain fog. We can only suspect and don't know anything for sure. All we know is the night didn't add up. We experienced an extreme and unlikely level of intoxication for the amount we drank. Because we don't even know for sure if we were drugged, it's foolish to then suspect anyone of drugging us. But she and I ended up having conspiracy theories anyway. We figured both ended up with a split dose, which is why we both got messed up and were also okay. Hence why I think it was in the water. Jeff had access to my drinks. He probably assumed I would be alone like last week. He saw me drink more the previous week and might assume I would again. But why reject me? Why even drug in the first place when I showed up with a friend? There's not a viable plan to get me out and no motive. There's another possible suspect, if I can call anyone that. Somebody I see around the area a lot and who always gives me the creeps. He was there the week before. He stayed the whole night last Monday, but it's almost too convenient and he'd have a harder time getting anywhere near our drinks unnoticed. Or maybe it was someone random just trying to create chaos. Amelia is getting her blood tested today, but likely we'll never know or be able to confirm or deny it. I'll talk to the bar just to give them a heads up. Be careful out there. What do you think?